Welcome back to another episode of the Oak and Rock Fatherhood YouTube channel. I am your host, Zachary Small, joined by the permanent co-host, Anthony Migliorino. Anthony, what's going on, brother?
What's up, Zach? How we doing?
I'm doing very well. Today, we are joined by a special guest, a guest I've had on the Family Alpha podcast multiple times, a man who has taught my children how to make bread literally while zooming from the inside of my home. That is Jared McLain. Jared has joined us to talk about the cognitive development and emotional development of children. Jared, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, guys.
We're really happy to have you. You know, our first conversation that you and I had is great. The conversations that you brought to the fatherhood discussions inside the Fraternity of Excellence have been solid. The insights gleaned there, fantastic. Today, we're talking about the development of a child's mind. So before we dive down that rabbit hole, what sent you down this path?
Wow, that's actually a pretty complex question. I will say that that it was kind of a roundabout approach for a little bit of it. For a little bit of context, I'm on the verge of getting my PhD in psychology. This is my second attempt at a PhD because I ran out of time and money the first time. But I sort of ran into psychology later in my late 20s, early 30s, and found a deep love for it as I studied it, and I started to see how rich of a subject it was and how much it resonated with me. It just became something that was absolutely fascinating, and I wanted to dig in as much as I could. So any class I could take that involved psychology, I'm like, let's do this. And this is in my post-grad work. So I'm starting my master's in another thing, and I ended up getting a master's in psychology for my second master's, and then started an educational psychology PhD. And then eventually went on to do another master's. Then I'm starting on this PhD now, or I'm finishing up this PhD now. So, I mean, it's been a lifetime, feels like a lifetime, but at least 20 years of study in this subject. And I just can't get enough of it. So this is something that for me is personally just so fascinating and interesting that I just have to build on it.
Now, when you started down this path, did you have kids?
Yeah, I did. When I started psychology, I had my oldest son, Caleb, was probably 2 or 3. And since then I've had 2 other kids and 1 stillborn child. And the best part was watching them grow as I'm learning about the psychology of what's going on. And you end up with this sort of bizarre thing where you've got this practical experience of raising your kids, where in the back of your mind, you're learning about they know this, they do this, they act like this. This is something you should be aware of. And then you're trying to like hook those two up, because I'm just at the beginning of my understanding of it in psychology while I'm busy, trying to raise these human beings. And it didn't really start to click for me until much later, as I got a lot more versed in it, a lot more depth of knowledge, but also the experience of raising my kids helped reinforce that. So it was a real building blocks between the two of them together that really helped me out.
Yeah, that was obviously, the next question. So you kind of spearheaded that one, which is, as you're learning about it, was it changing the way you were interacting with the kids? And because that's
100%.
Obviously the hope here, you're going to listen to this channel, You're going to learn something, you're going to improve. So how would you say, as you were learning about the development of a child's mind and your own mind, that you changed your approach to the way you were raising them, or maybe just interacting with them?
The biggest light bulb moment for me in that difference between raising my kids and the learning that I was getting from psychology was a final understanding of how vastly different our thinking processes are and how we understand the world. Let me give a practical example of that. A gentleman by the name of Jean Piaget, a child development psychologist in the 1940s and 50s, came up with a couple of experiments that are actually kind of cool. One of them is called the law of conservation. And this is something I used to do in my classroom, and I've done it with my own kids. And kids up to about the age of 6 or so have this problem of understanding the law of conservation. And the experiment goes like this. You take 2 glasses, one of them's short and fat, the other one's tall and thin. And you take another glass and you fill it up with water to a certain level. Like you take a measuring cup and fill it up for 1 cup, pour it into the short fat one, and then you fill it up again, exactly the same amount, pour it into the tall skinny one. And you ask a kid, which one has more water in it? which of these two, the short fat cup or the tall thin cup, which one has more water? And a kid up until about the age 6 will always point the tall one. Like, that one's got more water in it. And if you've ever had kids and you're like, you have like sippy cups or bottles, and you have one that's kind of short and fat and one that's kind of tall and skinny, you've seen this, you've experienced this. They're like, I want the tall one. But then you ask a kid that's about 7, and you're like, which one has more water? And they'll look at you kind of funny, like, what do you mean? They have the same. It's like it's a trick question. They really just, all of a sudden something happened cognitively where they're like, of course, they're the same. You poured in the same amount of water. Why are you asking me this stupid question? And when I do it in my classroom, it was hilarious because these kids would literally look at me like I was stupid. Like, why are you asking such a dumb question? And they were a year older than their sibling who I just asked that, and they pointed right away, the tall one. That's the one. So that's a good example of, as adults, do you ever remember having looked at something like that and said, oh yeah, tall one's totally got more water in it? I mean, you can't even remember having that kind of thought process. And yet, as a 6-year-old, there's no question, it's the tall one. And that's just a good example of how far apart we are from our kids in their understanding of the world. It's not just we have more experience. They literally cannot think in the same way that an adult does when they're young. And that, like I said, that experiment for me was one that just really turned on a light bulb. It's like, holy crap, these kids really just, they don't think that way. And it's funny that, as adults, we look at these kids and we're like, oh, they're just small humans. Yeah, to a certain extent, but they're not small adults. They don't think like adults. They think like kids. And you have to be able to understand that their level of thinking is just not there. And they aren't going to have the same kind of understanding that we will as adults.
No, and that's a great point. I will say that in the last year, I've had many conversations with Jared about this. We've talked about child development, and we've talked about the struggles that parents have. These ideas and these concepts, like he was just explaining the difference between a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. We don't recognize it as a parent. We think there's set ways and what kids should do at different ages based on what we're told, right? When they should read, when they should walk, when they should be able to reason. And I find it a little crazy that when they're babies, we all understand the needs, or we all understand their capability, right? If they cry, food, diaper, or sleep, they're tired. As they get older, we see that they start to pick up on voices and they start to see. So we're real aware of their abilities at those young ages. But for some reason, what I see a lot with the men that I speak to and coach, they can't take this to that level when the kid becomes a toddler or when he's 6 or 7. There's some kind of breakdown there that we overlook. So I wanted to ask you, Jared, because I don't think I've ever asked you this question. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that it's such a difficult transition?
I actually, while you were saying that, I'm really glad you asked that, because while you're saying that, one of the things that we typically react to people based on how they react to us. And for children, one of the key components, in fact, not for children, for anybody, one of the key components that we use in understanding the intelligence level of another human being is the vocabulary that they use. And this is universal. When you talk to somebody and they use those big $5 words, you're like, dang, dude is sharp, and you automatically are like, wow, that must be a really smart cookie. This is crazy. And then if they use simple language, you're like, all right, well, everybody needs to, have a skill somewhere, we'll see where, you just automatically give them less intelligence because they're not using the big fancy words. There's other factors that go into that as well. But for children, when they're like 2 and they're just, having that language explosion, they're starting to finally interact and have and talk to you. They don't use really adult level language. And so you talk to them at their level. And so you think, okay, my child has a question for me, or I'm trying to explain a complex subject to my kids. Let's say that you have a death in the family, and you want to explain that grandma died to your 3-year-old child. Well, you think, okay, if I lower my language vocabulary to their level, they can now understand it because I'm using words that they use. That's not how it works. Yeah, you've lowered it to their language at levels they use, and they can understand the words, but they may not understand the concepts that you do as an adult. They don't reason the way you do as an adult. So just dumbing down your language doesn't bring you to their level. It can't be done because their level is not anywhere near your level, and you don't understand how far away your level is. Again, it comes down to the thing. You don't even remember
this is at
what it was.
2 years old, right? You're talking about?
It doesn't even, at 2 years old, at 6 years old, at 8 years old, at 14 years old. You think that you're like, oh yeah, I totally remember what it was like to be a teenager. No, you don't. What you remember were the experiences. You don't remember what it's like to think like a teenager. You can't remember what it's like to think like a teenager. You can't even remember what it was like to think when you were 25. You can't reverse engineer your brain like that.
You're excluding Zac, though, right, from this? I think he still thinks like a teenager once in a while.
I was going to say, I mean, he's got that 12-year-old brain going.
As you were. Carry on, good sir.
but that's part of the problem is we think if we go to their level of vocabulary, all of a sudden we are now on their level. Or if I kneel down and I go face to face with my kids, I'm now on their level, and they're going to understand me because I'm no longer this, imposing figure over them. Still, no, there's a cognitive difference. There's a difference in reasoning that can't be bridged that easily. It can be bridged. It's just not easy to remove all that experience as an adult, remove that ability to reason, and then suddenly come down to the level of a kid who at a young age thinks the tall glass. That doesn't work. So it's much more difficult to adjust the way you talk to kids and to think the way the kids will think. You can't do that. You have to go on a much more basic level, and you have to have a ton more patience, because guess what? They're not going to grasp it as fast as you do.
Yeah.
They're not going to understand it as quickly as you do. It's going to take repetition, and it may even take repetition and age. You may be trying to convince them of a concept that they're not going to understand until they're 15 or 20 or 16. Like, let's take the cup/bottle example. Okay. You have a brother and a sister. You're going to give them a cup. They always fight over the tall cup, right? Why do they always fight over the tall cup or the tall bottle? Because that's the one that has the most liquid in it. They want the most liquid. And so you try to teach them, listen, they both have the same. They do.
Greedy capitalists.
They're egocentric and greedy. That's kids. But you're trying to convince them, and you're like, no, they have the same. Look, I'm pouring the same amount in each one. I don't see why you guys are fighting over this. You shouldn't be fighting. This is very simple. And you're never going to get there until they turn 7. Then you're going to be, they have the same. Oh yeah, you're right. So it takes not just reasoning, but sometimes just maturity is the only solution to some of those things you're trying to convince your kid of that just can't be done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important when they're at those younger ages to understand this. Because if we can understand it as a parent, then instead of continually being repetitive and trying to get our point across, what I've found that's worked best with the little kids, 3 years and younger, is not so much repeating your words and trying to reason with them, but connecting with them on a physical touch level, right? When your kid's melting down, instead of trying to get your point across, comfort them, right?
Yeah.
Human touch is a great language that everybody understands, right? A hug, everybody knows that hugs are good, kids to, well, most adults. But when you struggle in that area, my recommendation would be to parents is connect physically, right? Pick up your kid, hug them, comfort them, instead of always trying to get the point across. And then when they're calmed down, then you can start getting those reps in and explaining things. And hopefully by the time they're 6 or 7, what you've said will have sunk in a little bit to help them reason better.
Yeah, we'll start to reason better. You don't get really good reasoning skills until you start to become a teenager, and even then, it's kind of it's pretty sketchy. But as children, you can't really don't ever expect them to reason at the level that we think of reasoning. They have their own way of thinking about things, And yeah, you can continue to try to teach them and continue to do that. But we, you and I have heard this before from a number of people. It's like, yeah, I keep trying to teach my kid to do this. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. You're going to have to keep trying because it's not going to happen right away. You have to be patient. You have to keep going because eventually those two ideas catch up. Their reasoning skills come up to a level where what you're trying to teach them eventually resonates, and yeah, they'll finally get it. It may take a long time to get there. Sometimes it may not ever get there, but it takes a little while. Now, one of the things you just said, I want to touch on a little bit more as well, which is emotional development for children. You're saying like the kids are on a meltdown and you have to connect with them and help them with that. One of the biggest, most important roles of a parent over young children and children into their late teens is helping them regulate emotion. And that's what a lot of parents don't really understand. Children don't recognize the source or even what a particular emotion is. When they feel fear, they may recognize it as fear, but they don't know how to regulate it. They don't know how to control it. When they get angry, you get those meltdowns. When they get when they don't understand something, they can get angry for that or scared. And so their emotions are basically unchecked in comparison to a full-grown adult. We also know adults that their emotions are still unchecked. They never learned how to do that. But for children, that's just the way that they are. They don't have that capacity. They haven't learned how to control their emotions. And so as parents, our number one job is to help them control and regulate their emotions. And it doesn't happen right away. But yeah, those little moments of kids having a meltdown. Okay, you know what? Don't just sit there and berate them. Why are you having a meltdown? What's wrong with you? You don't seem to understand. That's going to help a lot.
Well, they don't understand.
Really going to help them. They don't understand, and you're angry, and they're melting down.
Yeah, all
hell breaks loose. There's nothing that's going to help with that. But when they're having that meltdown, and you can stop and just say, "Come here. It's okay. It's okay. Let's breathe. Okay, just let's and then do it with them. Breathe in, breathe out, and just take them and comfort them and hold them until they can get that emotion under control. And it may take several minutes. It may take a long time. I've had times where with my daughter when she was younger, it would take upwards of 15-20 minutes of calming her down before she was able to calm down off of an emotional peak. It could take longer than that. I know friends who have kids that have autism, and it can take upwards of a half an hour to 45 minutes sometimes to calm them down from a really bad break. But they stuck with it. They get them to calm down. And then once they're calmed down, now you can have a slightly different conversation. And the conversation isn't, now we don't have breakdowns. That's not the conversation they need. What the conversation they need is, what was it that you were so upset about? Where did it come from? Why did you get so upset? And sometimes you'll even have to suggest things to them. Was it because you didn't get what you wanted? Why was that so important to you? Is there something we can do to solve that later? I mean, you work with them to say, okay, well, let's talk about why. And so if you can get to those sources, if you can get them to start to look at their emotions, to identify them. A couple of fun tricks that a friend of mine taught me was talk to them about where the emotion came from in their body. Where did they feel it? Did they feel it in their stomach? Did they feel it in their chest? Did they feel it in their head? Did they feel it in their body? And sometimes you can help them understand when you feel that feeling in your stomach, that could be like disgust or worry. Did you feel it in your chest? That could be sadness, or it could, and it's going to vary. But by having them localize it on their body in some way, will help them to sort of connect with it a little bit more. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody. But by putting it on somewhere in their body, they then recognize, oh, no, that was from here. Yeah, you're right. And then they can when they have that feeling again, they can feel it localized on their body from where they experience it, and it helps them recognize that emotion again later. So it's all about helping them recognize and regulate. And I'm still working with my daughter. My daughter's 15, and I still help her identify and regulate her emotions.
There's something there I want to sort of stress and highlight and maybe go a little bit deeper into, or just cover again. And it's that you're recognizing and you're responding to that emotion. That's the aim. What you're not saying is recognizing and repressing that emotion.
Oh, no.
It's not, oh, you're angry. Well, hold that in. You can't have that temper tantrum or whatever it is. My kids, 12 and 9, recently went to a wedding. This is a live example that just happened in my life. 2 different moments, son and daughter, a lot of activities going on, a lot of people. Both of them I could tell were a little off. They were just overwhelmed, overtired, overstimulated. Simple walks. Hey, how you doing? Oh, there's just so much going on. Hey, let's go for a walk. It's not, hey, suck it up. Put it together. We're at a wedding. Family's here. I don't want you to embarrass me, kid. It's like, no, hey, you and I, let's go for a little walk, little lady. Take my son. Hey, grab the football. Let's go play catch. And it's just that little removal. These people, when these kids are having these temper tantrums, they have now recognized, I didn't get what I wanted, whatever. And they're in a full-blown reaction. They're in a full-blown, emotions are out the wheel. I don't know how to handle this. I view that as a product of the repression parenthood. Just hold it in. Well, it's going to erupt eventually. And you're not teaching your children, how do I handle myself when I'm mad, disappointed, frustrated? And sometimes these parents have these kids at parties that are late, not recognizing, hey, your kid was ready for bed an hour ago. They're cranky because they're overtired, just like you would be as an adult if you were to be up past your quote-unquote bedtime. So we sort of strip that agency from our kids. Yeah, no, they're not. They're fully just doing what they're doing. But I see a lot of parents saying, well, suck it up. Well, you haven't taught them how to kind of grind through it or grit through it. So that response to it, when you can teach your kids to do that, I don't think it grows their emotional intelligence. I don't think it grows that. I think it just teaches them how to better regulate, as you were saying. So I just want to make sure that parents listening, we're not saying repress that emotion. You should feel it, but learn how to properly channel it.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. It does build emotional intelligence, because part of emotional intelligence is recognizing when you're having the emotions, is recognizing when you need that break. As adults, a good emotionally intelligent adult not only understands their own emotions, but because they understand their own emotions, they're better able to recognize the emotions in others and react appropriately. And so
I think what I was trying to say is that it's not that you won't feel the emotion. That emotion will still. Yeah. Well said. Because it does teach you how to handle it. Yeah, go ahead.
Shut up.
I'm going to get a crypto cup. That way nobody can take it from me.
No, but that's a well accepted point, and something that I'm glad you brought up, because when we talk about identifying and regulating, that's a huge part of it, is helping your child. I mean, as adults, let's think about it. When we feel fear, the first thing we want to do, if you have some kind of control, and you can, say, I'm not going to be, showing my fear to my kids. Okay, great. But you still feel the fear. But as soon as you feel it, you're like, why? Why am I feeling this fear? And then you can identify and say, okay, I'm afraid because whatever's happening. I just lost my job. I'm now afraid that I'm going to provide for my kids. And that is an emotional moment that is going to be hard for you to react with. But you've identified, you know where it is. You know where that fear came from. Because we've had the experience of being able to say, this is fear. I know what this is. Now I need to identify what's causing it. How do I address it? But for a child, they feel the fear, and that becomes all there is. Fear. There's no why. There's no anything else. It becomes an overwhelming sensation because they're new to it. They've never experienced it before, or they've never experienced it at that level, or they've never experienced it for that reason. And so you have to be able to work with them first to identify it and say, are you scared? And you will be amazed that oftentimes when you identify an emotion for a kid, you may have to ask them, are you scared? Are you anxious? Are you worried? And then eventually you'll find it and they'll be like, yeah, I'm worried. Okay, it's okay to be worried. Let's talk about why you're worried. What is it that made you worried? And then you may have to help them out. They're like, I don't know. Is it because of homework? Is it because your sister's gone? Is it because your mom's not home yet? I as a good example of this, my son Gavin, whenever we would make dinner, he would, if he ever walked by the kitchen while we were making dinner, he would stand there and just watch us for a few minutes, and then he had this just really kind of worried look on his face. And eventually I would ask him, I'm like, hey, Gavin, you want to come help me make dinner? He'd be like, yeah. And he would stir the pot. He'd put ingredients in, he'd put in spices, but as soon as I asked him ever to cut anything, he was like, nah, you can do that. And he would just watch me just like a hawk. And so that made me think, because he was watching me so carefully, I thought, he's trying to learn. He's trying to learn how to cut. He's trying to learn how to use a knife. But that wasn't it at all. He was dead afraid of those knives. He was so worried that I was going to cut my finger off. That's why he was watching. He wasn't watching to learn. He was watching because he was freaking scared to death that dad was going to hurt himself with that knife. And he'd never experienced that. I'd never done that before. He'd never seen that. He just saw how sharp that knife was and what it did to meat and vegetables. And he was like, this is crazy. And it took us a long time to finally realize, and he's a very quiet kid and doesn't really talk about things like that. It took us several years of working with him in this area to figure out he had massive anxiety around using a knife, and slowly working with him. And once we identified the anxiety, we were able to go, I mean, this is a kind of a silly example, but now he likes to collect knives. You know, by identifying what it was and working with him on it and teaching him carefully, look, I get it. You have anxiety over this. Let's teach you why you don't need to have that anxiety. Let's teach you how you can work with this safely. And now it's like his favorite thing. He sharpens them and collects them. And he loves it. But it took us a while to identify what that anxiety, where the source of that anxiety was. And it was really cool to be able to finally work with him through that. So he still has a bunch of anxiety in other ways, but
no, he's a samurai.
He's going to be able to slay his anxiety. No problem. That's crazy. It's super important to be able to help your kids and work with your kids slowly, carefully, quietly, as much as possible, never yelling at them. Identify their emotions, identify the emotions in others, which we'll talk about in a second, and then to work with them to be able to regulate those. It takes a long time, a lot of patient work.
You know, in your studies, have you seen parents placing sort of the expectations that are on them onto the child, and they're trying to accelerate the cognitive abilities of their kid? You know, because like, oh, my kid's not smart enough for any. Is that playing a role too that's a detriment to our kids these days? And just based off your expression, I think I know my answer. But for those who might not have thought of that, I would love just maybe even briefly, how is that playing a role in what's happening with our kids and sort of forcing them to, hey, pick it up faster because that kid over there is?
I'm not sure how much emphasis I can put on this, that is the stupidest thing you can possibly do to your kids. Performance anxiety, if nothing else. Yeah, it is. Here's the thing. Let's take it back to us. Let's take it back to adults, things that we understand. Go onto Instagram, right? You look at the lives that people take pictures of for themselves, and you think, dang, that family has it together. They've got it going on. You're seeing the highlights. You're seeing the best things they have to offer. We're religious. We go to church. My wife sometimes will watch other families that go to church, and she'll see these families with kids that are well behaved, they're well dressed, and she's like, man, that's the perfect family. I wish we could have that too. Yeah, they're the perfect family for 2 hours. And then you go home and they're going to be yelling at each other. And I happen, a couple of these families, I knew them pretty well. And I talked to the dad. I'm like, yeah, my wife thinks your family's perfect. He goes, oh, you should see us when we get home. And they're, they have meltdowns all the time and things are terrible and they can't get them to clean the rooms, all kinds of things. And so when you're comparing yourself to someone else, intuitively, even though sometimes it's hard to do that, you understand, I'm comparing this to something that's not real. I'm comparing this to something that I can't achieve on my own. And when we do that with our kids, there's two problems. The biggest problem, the one I wish I could stop more than anything else is, I didn't do that successfully when I was your age. So you're damn well going to do it successfully because you are going to be my making up for my failures as a child. Or I got these opportunities taken away from me. So you're going to have them and you're going to take advantage of them. Why are you putting that kind of pressure on your kid? I mean, why are you trying to make them live your life? That's just garbage. Let them live their life. And then the other one is, that comparison. Hey, well, Johnny down the street, he's in the advanced class and you should be too. So we're going to get you into that class. No. One of the things that I talk a lot about with some of these kids, my son Gavin, I'm going to take him as an example, and Sabrina as well. My son Gavin has high anxiety. He has the starts of the beginning of OCD, not full blown, but it's in there. He has ADHD, and because of that, he has all kinds of issues socially, but he is ridiculously smart. Math to him is like totally easy. English is the worst thing in the world. For him to write is like pulling teeth. It's so hard for him. And we had to learn slowly and realizing in other ways, Gavin is not Bobby or Steve or anybody at his school. Gavin is Gavin. Nobody else. You can't compare him to anybody else because he's not like anybody else. And there's certain things that he does which are unbelievably cool. Like he has the ability to empathize and understand kids younger than him better than anybody I know. He understands kids with disabilities. He is able to connect with kids that have autism in ways that his teachers in his classroom are like, tell you what, Gavin, I'm going to teach and then you teach him because you get it. And when these kids have meltdowns, they're like, Gavin, can you help us out? That his teachers literally call him out to go help calm down an autistic kid who's having a meltdown because Gavin gets it. He understands it. And that's a thing of development that you wouldn't spot normally. And you compare him to other kids. Well, Gavin, why do you have a D in English? You know, what the hell? But, okay, so he has a D in English. So what? He has this amazing ability to connect with people in ways that I will never understand. And yeah, he has some other problems. So I help him. We help him try to overcome those. Comparing him to other kids only leads to us feeling disappointed in him, but looking at him as him leads us to say, we can celebrate where you do well. We can celebrate these things that are absolutely remarkable. And by realizing you have a weakness with writing, we can now work with you on that. And we can help you out. But we're also totally willing to give you slack that, you know what, if you aren't doing well in the class, what help do you want? What can we do for you? You tell us, and we'll make suggestions, and we'll work together until we can find a way to help you succeed. Because he wants to succeed. He doesn't like to fail. He wants to do well, but we have to help him in different ways. But as soon as you start, it just drives me crazy when I see people that are comparing their kids to other kids. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. It reduces your happiness. It reduces their happiness. And you may never, ever be able to get them there. Celebrate your kids for who and what they are, and find the things that they do well and live with that. Don't live with, oh, man, I wish you were better at football. It's garbage.
I love it.
Remember
we said about Angry Jared? No, it's good, man. It's the perpetual inadequacy is something that I've been kind of thinking on recently. It's like no matter what they do, you know, because the parents already moved on to the next thing, because they're looking to fill that void instead of doing, you know, that it's a flaw when it could be a feature, you know, the way their kid is and what their kid's going through, you know, and it's been interesting with Anthony. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, with us, it was actually really hard. This thing with Gavin that I'm describing now took us a long time to get there because we didn't understand him. And we didn't understand why it was so difficult. And it wasn't until we worked with several different professional child developmental psychologists and a few others, and it was a complete accident that led us to understanding a full understanding of where his problems were with mostly anxiety. And it took us years of working with him and exploring it in every way we could to finally come up to this idea of what was causing him these issues that were clearly distressing to him that we couldn't figure out. And if we wouldn't have stuck with that, if we would have said, Gavin, we give up. you know what? Just fail. We don't even care. You know, this is just too frustrating. I can't deal with this anymore. If we had said that, we would now have a child, and I can see it very clearly, that would be failing every class in school, who would sequester himself in his room, and we would never see from him because he'd always want to be playing video games, because that was his only solace, because we couldn't interact with him. But instead, we learned slowly, and it was very painful, it was very hard, very expensive, to find ways to help him, to understand him. We still don't understand him completely, but at least we're getting to a little bit where we can. And getting to that place was far more worth it than where we were before. Where we were before was spending 3 hours fighting with him, try to get him to do a simple task like wash the dishes, to where we are now, where we're like, okay, Gavin, your chore this week is doing the dishes. Can you do those today? Yes. And they eventually get done. Not on our time frame, not when it would make us happy. We'd like it done when we ask him to do it. But we've learned that that's just painful and it doesn't work. And so do them at 9:30 at night. They got done. Who cares? As long as it got done. And so it was just so hard for us to let go of those expectations that we have as parents of what we want to see, of how we think he ought to be, and to adjust that to what he is. That made all the difference, and it made our interactions with him. And now, you know, he's my bud. We go rock climbing, and it's one of the funnest things. Like when I ask him, like, Kevin, you want to go rock climbing? Yes, I want to go rock climbing. And he will jump at the chance to go hang out with me outside doing something crazy. Whereas, you know, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to connect with him at all. It would have just been like, okay, Gavin, you haven't done anything that we've asked you to do this week, so, you know, I don't know what to do. So it's not. I have complete sympathy for any parent that's going through those struggles. But if you're going to continue to work with that thing of, this is my expectations, you're going to fulfill them, and that's the way it's going to be, you know what? Go to hell.
You know, in the intro, I almost said that this is the guy that's rock climbing. We're giving shout outs to in the live Q&A. But I was like, I don't want to, you know, make a joke and detract from the professional like work you're doing. But you brought it up with the rock climbing. So I am going to say you are the guy that we keep shouting out during these live Q&As about the rock climbing with the kids.
It's because it's fun. Everybody should do it.
You know, I was going to say it with Anthony, you know, something I came across is the first time I found someone where I didn't feel like I was like the freaking weirdo, because I don't put a lot of emphasis on certain things. Like when it comes to grades, when it comes to sports or certain things like that, like I truly could not be further removed from the give a shit bucket or factor with what my kids are doing. You know, as long as they're doing what they want to do and they're doing their best. Now, I'm not saying like, hey, go skip school, kid, but I'm like, hey, your sport is yours, man. If you want to build rockets, dude, we're signing up for rocket school. If you want to play baseball, we're doing that. You know, and he chose his sport. My son does well. My daughter does well. Same thing in school. Sure. They're doing well academically, but there's no, you must get this or do this. It's like, hey, like, what are we working with? All right. Or where are you struggling? All right, cool. How can I help you? Like, it's no big deal. You know, and the emphasis some of these people put on themselves, even internally, you know, the parent, their fear that's driving them. They're afraid that, how will this impact me? And how will that look upon my kid? And I'm not just saying they're assholes. You know, some of these parents are afraid that their child's future and opportunities will be stunted. But a lot of that fear is that, well, how would that look if my kids, I don't want the kid who's failing. You know, and one of the dudes that I know, I'm going to leave the connection at large. I don't know who watches these shows, but somebody in my inner circle, you know, family had an issue with how I raised my kids. They had an issue with the fact that I'm like, I don't care. Like, we'll homeschool, we'll do whatever. Like, I really don't care how they're going. As long as my kids are getting the education they need, I'm not worried about where they're ranked. And they said, well, what if they start failing, or what if they can't go to college to get this, or look at what, you know, Elon Musk, he went to school and they started listing all these things. And I had to stop him. I'm like, do you realize that Elon Musk with his Ad Astra and what he has his kids in, there are no grades. There are no levels. He has these kids together. the people that you're quoting, these people you built up in your head as to what success is, you're so ingrained in the consumption and the cycle that society wants you in, that you can only have happiness and connection and success if you hit these little tick marks, that you're not even realizing the people you look up to that are happy are not doing the things that you're saying you need to do to be happy and content and satisfied in life. They build up these things as to what's needed for happiness. And it's like they've stripped the human aspect of that. And with the development of a child, a lot of what you've been saying has been the interactions you're having with your child. We haven't focused too much on the literal development of the mind. We've focused on how that plays into the family dynamic, the role that parents have, and how you can connect and help your child thrive and grow. So there is a whole element to the development of a child that comes from your interactions with supporting their development internally.
Yeah. Well, and part of it, part of what is feeding into that from that perspective, there's all kinds of psychological theories I could get into, but one of the big ones is that the expectations that we have of how the world should work informs our behavior quite a bit. And so if you're looking at the world thinking, this is the way the world should work, this is my expectation for the way things should happen, that definitely informs what you do and how you think about things, social cognitive theory. But it's when you take that to an extreme that it becomes a problem. And that's where you say that idea of, okay, well, society says my child should go to college. That's the expectation. And so now I have to then take that expectation and put it onto my kid. If you're going to go to college, you better go to a good one. If you're going to go to a good one, you have to get good grades. And if you have to get good grades, that means I am going to take control of this situation. And I'm going to say, this is going to happen. You don't have a choice anymore. And that's when that becomes a detriment to the child's psychological and emotional development, because now they don't have a voice. And to think about that from an adult perspective, do you like it when you're at work and your boss says, you're going to do this, you're going to do it now, you don't have a choice, drop everything and make this happen, and it's some crap task that you just don't want to do? How enjoyable is it when you are forced to do something that you have no autonomy, that you have no choice in what's going on? It sucks. And when you do that to your kids, guess what you're doing? You're stunting and inhibiting their natural growth cycle, their natural emotional and cognitive development, because you're forcing them into a little box of your making based on your expectations. Be able to, and there's ways to still make that work, that you can have, that you can help them get to meet some of those expectations if that's something that's really valuable, if they also are willing to do that. But forcing them and not giving them any autonomy to get there, it doesn't help their development. It's actually ruining their development. I have my own theories on that. They're not experimentally based or anything like that. There's no research on it, but I think
present them with the fear of failure. If you're
fear of failure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big distinction between what success is and what happiness is. So but we try to box them together, right? We try to put them together and say that if you're successful, you'll be happy. And what you were just saying, in success, right? Kids need to go and fail. They need to experience hardship. That's how they get better. That's how they'll succeed in the future. Yeah, you can't always
plow the field in front of them. If you remove all obstacles, guess what? They now no longer learn how to overcome obstacles. Yeah. They're just gonna be the little happy-go-lucky kid that always has everything work for them because their parents were busy plowing the field in front of them. No, give them some difficult to do once in a while.
Well, it's the same thing with parenting, right? As fathers, everything you've spoken about today, we have to be willing to do hard things as fathers to figure out child development, to understand it, to actually study it and realize that we could be damaging or contributing to our child's regression and some emotional problems they might be having. So we have to understand we can combat that, right? By acquiring some of that knowledge ourselves.
Yes.
And, with happiness, I don't, again, like what Zac was saying, I don't put emphasis on what my kids, where they go in far as succeeding. I want them to be good people. I want them to live with morality. And I believe that's going to help them be happy as people, right? How they treat themselves, how they treat other people, being able to empathize. So I just wanted to make that distinction. A lot of these parents are so afraid that their kids are not going to succeed. And that's why they over control. And that's why they don't let their kids take any independent action in their life, because it's all fear-based.
We had a very interesting experience. The way we raise our kids is I want them to be as independent as possible. Like from a very early age, we taught them, this is how you do laundry. Like at 6 years old, we're teaching them how to do their own laundry. We're teaching them how to wash dishes. I'm teaching them how to fix food in the kitchen. All of my kids can make their own loaf of bread from scratch. All of my kids can make an entire meal, several different types on their own. No problem at all. And they've been able to do that since they were 10 years old. But when we had an experience once with a friend of ours, our son Caleb had a couple of friends. They were twins, twin girls, and they came with us, and we took them. I don't remember what we were doing, but we went to a McDonald's to get some food because we were all hungry and we'd been out all day. So we're like, I go to the front and I'm like, all right, Caleb, go, order. Gavin, order. Sabrina, order. And I turn to these two girls. I'm like, order. And they're like, we don't know how. I was floored. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know how? Like, our parents always order for us. We've never ordered. I'm like, well, look at the frickin' menu right now. What do you want? And then tell that person what you want. And they're like, I want a cheeseburger. You know, like it was like this scary thing to like tell somebody that wasn't their parent that they wanted a cheeseburger. And after that was done, my wife and I are like, what? How? I can't even begin to wrap my mind around a world where you have kids that can't even order from a fast food restaurant. I mean, just, are you kidding me? Where's the autonomy? What are you doing to give your kids the ability to act for themselves, to make choices, and to have a sense of control in their lives? And that's really what it comes down to. And this is across all age groups. It doesn't matter how young you are, how old you are. You need autonomy. That's the psychological term that we use. That means you can make decisions that affect the outcomes for you. That's what autonomy is. And if you cannot make decisions, if you cannot act in a way that affects your outcomes, your environment, then you start to lose happiness. You start to lose creativity. You start to actually have more stress in your life, which affects all kinds of things. It affects health, cognitive development, your heart health. Everything gets affected by excessive levels of stress. And one way to reduce those levels of stress is to exercise autonomy, to exercise the choice that you have to affect your world. And with children, that's especially crucial. You have to give them a chance to make choices. And it doesn't even have to be complex choices. It can be as simple as, we need you to go to bed. I don't want to go to bed. Okay, would you rather go to bed in 5 minutes or in 10 minutes? I'd rather go to bed in 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes. Your choice. You said this, so let's go to bed in 10 minutes. But you just removed that thing of you controlling to them now having a sense of autonomy, and it changes their whole approach. It changes their happiness. It changes how they react to everything. And adults, same dang thing. You can't, as soon as you give an adult a choice, would you like X or Y? Hey, you gave me a choice. Let's go. Let's go with X. Instead of, you have to take Y. Are you kidding? I don't want Y. You know, it's the exact same reaction you have. Your kids have too. And you want to develop that. You want to develop that ability for them to feel like they have control in their world. And that breeds, like I said, happiness, mental health, physical health. All of it gets better as soon as you let them adjust and make decisions for themselves. Crazy that people don't even do that.
I have a question for you, Jared. Where would you say that behavior is more concentrated, or where it comes from? Is it the parent who's very over controlling, or do you think it's from the parent who neglects their kids, or is it equal? I'm just wondering, like, where do you see where the most damage?
I think you hit on it earlier. I think it comes from the parent that has the most fear of outcomes. The parent that has the expectations that can't be met. The parent that is afraid of failure for their kids. The parent that wants to live through the kids. All those will all provide that source of you must do this. And whether that's from you must do this because I'm in control, or you must do this because you can't fail, or you must do this because this is what is expected of you. It doesn't matter where it comes from. And I don't think there's one that will be worse than the other. They all have the same end result of impacting your child's ability to have creativity, to think on their own, to be autonomous. It really doesn't matter. As long, when there is a problem with it, it's always going to have the same end result.
Yeah. It's interesting when you look at this, in different families, it's going to be different markers they're trying to hit. You see a lot of these adults who are operating entirely out of misery, but telling their children to do what they did for them to get the best in life. And it's like, you're miserable. Like, yeah. I don't know how you don't see that, but you are like in a really bad shape right now, and you're trying to tell your kid to do what you did. And I don't see that being the outcome, so, but that goes to the point of there is a sense of having to objectively assess yourself. The other one is you see a lot of traditions of families going to a certain college, naming their kids a certain name, doing a certain job, like it's different in each family, and even now in the South, I see, and I've spoken with, hey, I'm a 4th generation farmer. I'm a 6th generation farmer. You're like, man, like I couldn't imagine being your kid because the expectation is that their life is going to be a farmer. And to the point on tradition, a lot of label that slapped to me often is the tradcon, traditional conservative. And I don't fit that mold at all because, like, I'm trying to think in my family. In my family, I guess the running tradition is the military. My grandfather, my father, me. I have literally zero expectation of my son or daughter to join the military. I don't think they'll do it. I think I've raised them in a manner to where they won't fit in the way I needed it. I don't think they'll need it. So if they do it, cool. But in growing up, that was an expectation, like Zach. Like, obviously, you're going to go in the military. Which branch is the only thing? And so I'm sort of breaking traditions. But my tradition now and my legacy now is my goal is for you to be like me. I want you to be happy with who you are. And so when I say like me, I don't mean like me, literally Zach. I mean just a dude who's content with his life and looking to be my best self. That's what I want for my kids. And I've stripped all these other things as to what, I should pass down. We all go to Ohio. We all go to this. We're all engineers. We're all whatever the fuck. No, you're not me. My son will never be me. My daughter will never be me. And that allows them for me to support their development emotionally and cognitively, independently, in a sense. I don't really know what optimal development of my son is because I'm not my son, but I'm there to support wherever that goes. And I know you've got something amazing to drop, Jared, but I had to get all that out of my head.
No, it's all fine. No, what I was going to say is I have, despite the fact that I disagree with it, I have a great deal of compassion for people that think in that way. And the reason I have compassion for them is because what they're unable to do is let go of the egocentrism, to let go of that perception of what I went through is the right way to go through it. And Anthony and I have talked about this before, where you'll have parents that will be abusive to their kids. And they're not abusive to their kids yes, there are people that are abusive for controlling and for various reasons, but sometimes you get people that are abusive to their kids and they'll be abusive. And it's like, why are you abusive? Why are you doing this? It's like, it's a tough world out there. They've got to learn. They need to understand that this is the way that the world works. And so they're not doing it from this position of these kids suck and I'm going to beat it out of them. They literally think, I went through this. This is how I developed. I am going to teach them how to succeed better than me because I'm going to teach them young the types of experiences that I had. It's a cognitive mindset of my experience is the same as everyone's experience. And so that's the way it's going to be. And I have to teach from that experience. Another one of a similar mindset of that, a friend of mine, this is kind of a weird one, but it's kind of funny. A friend of mine, we were talking about, I don't remember how it came up, but the friend, there was 3 of us in the room, and one of them was like, yeah, I got it from my wife. He goes, oh, did you wake your wife when you woke up? He goes, no, I just rolled out of bed. He goes, you don't wake her up when you roll out of bed? He's like, no, I'm on my side and she's on his side. He goes, what? We're like, yeah, that's how we sleep. I sleep on this side and she sleeps on that side. And he goes, you mean you guys don't sleep in the middle together? And we're like, no, what are you talking about? And then he starts to describe how he went to his parents' house and he went into their bedroom for some reason, and he noticed that there was these 2 divots on either side of the bed. He's like, and you should see the emotion. I can't even describe the emotion in his face was so poignant. He's like, I couldn't believe it. My parents don't sleep together in the middle of the bed. And I thought, how sad that that's the way. Then later on, we kind of talked about this. There was about another 15 of us in the room. Like, how many of you guys sleep on 2 sides of the bed? And everybody's like, yo. And he's like, does everybody do this? What is? I mean, it was inconceivable to him that people that were married didn't cuddle together all night in the middle of the bed together. That's kind of a silly thing, but he was incapable of projecting or understanding that somebody would have a different experience than his personal experience. That's the right way, is what he did. Everybody else was wrong, even though in this particular example, that's the way probably 90% of people sleep when they're married, is in 2 separate sides of the bed, and you cuddle when you want to cuddle, and then when it's time to go to sleep, you go to your separate side. So again, a silly example, but it emphasizes that point of people only know their own personal experience. That's the only perspective they have. I can't know what your life was like, Zach. I can't know what Anthony's life was like. I can't live your life. I can't understand that. All I have is my experience. But once you realize that everybody's experience is their own, then you can start to look at your kids and say, aha, I had my experience. You're going to be very different from me. Let's let that take its own course. One way that manifests for me that I have a great deal of sympathy for and compassion for today's kids is, imagine what it's like to be a kid today. And I'm going to give a specific reason for that. When I grew up, I'm 50 years old now. When I grew up, I was in the pre-digital age. If I wanted to call somebody, I had a phone that hung on the wall and had a little dial thing. And I might be within a 5-minute walk of a phone at any given point throughout the day, unless I went way off in the woods somewhere. But I didn't have instant communication available in my pocket all the time. I didn't have instant information available to me in my pocket all the time. As I tried to form my sense of who I was, of my sense of self, guess what I had as my input? My family, my teachers, and my friends. The people that I hung out with, that I spent time with face to face. And now you get kids that are trying to develop that sense of self. And what do they have to work with? Not only do they have their parents and their siblings and their teachers and their friends and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and a million other voices telling them who they should be, how they should be, what's important, what's not important. And they listen to that crap. Can you imagine trying to identify a sense of self in that environment? And then we have the audacity to come to our children and say, my experience is the same as your experience, and you're going to do exactly what I did, and that's the way it's going to be. What is wrong with your brain? Because there is no way that your experience mirrors theirs, and you have to allow them to be themselves and to develop on their own. Once you start to impose those expectations of what you grew up with, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong, because it doesn't work that way.
I told you I was going to have to shift cameras.
I want to say, don't discredit the payphone. Payphones were
No. The payphones are awesome. I mean, great use of payphones.
No, it's interesting. You're absolutely correct. And that's something we've spoken about. I've never directly spoken to my son about, though. You know, I've never sat there and said, hey, man, like, I get why you want to be on your phone, or like, what are you looking at, or what are you checking out? Like, we've never had that angle on that discussion. That's a really, really good point on the kids these days. The kids these days have access to literally everything on this little device that a lot of the kids these days have. My daughter doesn't have a phone, and my son has it to take with him when he goes on, like for sports. He's got to call us after practice. But you see some of these kids, they live on it. We've had some of my friends, my son's friends, come over, and they're sitting on their phone at the house. I'm like, oh, hell no. Get outside, like, and I'm going to be training you. Like, welcome to the Thunderdome, kids. If you come to this house, we're training. We're training the sport. We're running around. We're doing something. And guess what? I'm going to kick your ass and whatever it is we're playing too. Bring your dad and tell him I said that because he's going to play him, kick his ass too. Baseball, football, doesn't matter. So it's interesting. It's a shock to these kids when they're pulled out of that world because you see them really light up. A kid that was sitting there in the corner on his phone is now, oh, I get to run around and play with this. I can throw that. I can kick this thing. Like, it is interesting, though. It's a different world.
But it goes even further than that, though. I mean, literally, think about it. Like my daughter, in a matter of 3, maybe 4 months, went from I can't even go from to. I can say that she engaged or discovered social media, and it changed her personality and her outlook on the world completely inside of 3 or 4 months, to the point where we barely recognized her as the same person that she was before she discovered all that. And that was our mistake. We gave her access to that before she was really ready for it. We didn't even think about the fact that she wouldn't be ready for it. We didn't recognize that. And we gave her access because, hey, we have it. Why not? Let's let her do it. We didn't think ahead of time that, oh my gosh, she's still developing her sense of self. And then we're going to give her this cacophony of voices that are shouting at her about what it is to be a woman, what it is to be, successful today as a person. And it's just silly. As an example for this, and a practical example that people may be able to resonate with a little bit. There's been some recent research that has, and I want to preface this a little bit by saying mental illness is a real thing. There are people that absolutely have a genetic component for depression, anxiety, whatever, and they have it, and it's theirs, and that's just the way that they were built. But there is very good research that has shown that those same disorders, depression and anxiety being the 2 big ones, have a social component. That with teenagers, if you have one person in a group of friends that has anxiety or depression, within a few months, it is 70% more likely that everyone in that group will now also be experiencing depression and anxiety. So it starts with one, and then they have a bunch of other voices that come in and say, it's okay. You can have depression, you can have anxiety. And guess what? Your friend has depression and anxiety. And then pretty soon, you start feeling the symptoms of depression or anxiety or both. And it has this social component that works through. That number is staggering. 70% more likely. It's almost a guarantee that they're going to have these same problems because one of their friends has it. And think about that from an adult perspective. If you have a friend that has depression, do you automatically think, you know what? Sounds like a good idea. Let's join you in your depression. I'm going to be happy with you there. You don't think that because you already have a sense of self, of who you are. Now, if you do suffer from depression, my heart is out to you and I'm sorry, but that's not something that I've suffered from. And I'm not going to go, you know what? My wife has depression. I think I'm going to get depression too. But for teenagers, because they haven't established that, oh, you have depression? Oh, maybe, you know what? I think I may have that too. Let's go on that together. We don't even understand the mechanism behind it, but we do understand the reality that it happens.
So, Jared, do you think that it's a peer pressure thing or kind of a misery loves company? Or do you think
I don't think it's either. I don't think it's either. I think it's literally that this is what he's like. People accept him for who he is. And they may even see the attention that's being given to those people. And they think, you know what? I probably have that too. And guess what? As a teenager, you kind of do. Because as a teenager, you don't understand the world. So you do have a level of anxiety because you are comparing yourself to an adult. And if you remember yourself as a teenager, you had anxiety all the time because you didn't understand what was going on. But now you're going to wallow in that, and you're going to experience it with other people, and it becomes more acute. So I don't think it's a peer pressure thing. Although
what about that developmental deficiency?
Well, that's the question. I want to piggyback on that one.
Talking about
on your developmental question, Anthony. When you were talking about from 6 to 7, that's when the cup, you can tell.
Yeah.
To Anthony's question, with social media, do you think there is a range where you're like, all right, you've built yourself up to whatever this age is, and now you can go? Or is it, again, going all the way back to the variables of what's happening in the home that dictates how fast that kid learns and can interact with social media? Is there an age for social media where it makes sense?
That is for an age for social media where it makes sense. My best guess, because we don't have good research on this. The problem is it's too new. The phenomenon as a pervasive thing is too new. We don't have the longitudinal data to say, you know what, kids that didn't start doing social media until they were 18 were better off mentally and physically than they were when they started at 12. We don't have that kind of information. We have some evidence for things like that in areas like pornography viewing. When you start earlier, it causes problems later. If you don't start till later, it's not quite as bad. There's areas where there's some tangential research, but we don't have anything longitudinally like that that's really good for social media. So my best guess is that you want to be late teens. I have no idea. Based on the experience of watching my kids, they seem to roll with it better as late teens than early teens. So that would be my best shot in the dark. But as far as to another question is, how long does that effect stay with you? That we also don't have any good research or data on, but based on other research of the development of a sense of self, the moral development of a sense of self, the certainty of your moral standing, Erickson's moral development theory, a few other things, based on those ideas, by not being able to establish a strong sense of self in those critical teenage years, that is a problem that's going to be with them the rest of their lives. They may never be able to recover from that without being able to establish that early on. That's not longitudinally research backed, but I see the correlates from other previous research that says, yeah, you know what, if you can't settle who you are, you're going to have problems later on. And I see social media affecting that and is going to cause more problems later on. We'll see what the research shows eventually, but there are some research that's going on that's hinting that that's the case, but we just don't have a good firm understanding of it yet. I wish I had better answers. I really do.
No, that was a good answer, but I wanted to see this from a standpoint where we would probably all agree that there's less fathers in the home. Both parents are working, and I would say the family unit is probably a lot less influential than it has been in the past. So now we have things like social media, cell phones, and all this stuff taking our kids' attention away. And I think if we can emphasize how important it is for fathers to be more involved early on, I think that would help combat what we're seeing more. I'm not saying it's going to fix it, but I think what you were talking about through development, if the father was present in those processes where he was actually developing his child, creating that true image, that true self that they have, when they do go out into the world, they're going to be less likely to be influenced by their peers or by social media, right, or by the other stuff that's happening. So this is at the cornerstone of how we develop our child's brains properly, is by our influence.
To even give that more emphasis, let's circle back to the very beginning. Guess what? If you are able to help your children understand and regulate their own emotions as early and as often as you can, by the time they do hit social media, you can now have conversations with them that they might be able to understand, to say, do you see the way that this imagery, the way that this thing is presented, is manipulating your emotions in this direction? Do you see that? Can you understand? And do you see how it's manipulating your emotion? The soft focus, the quiet music, the slow motion, guess what? All manipulative. And they're trying to get you to understand this. The difference between, understanding data, a series of things to understand, versus an anecdote, a single story. That doesn't tell the whole story. That doesn't tell everyone's story. That tells a story. Are you letting yourself be manipulated by that? Or, so it's the beginnings of regulating your mind and your emotion start in childhood. And those lessons have to continue on. To turn them over to social media, to say, well, dude's got an iPad, at least he's quiet. Oh, just, you know what? Let me strangle you now and take your kid and raise him properly. Which, I get in a lot of trouble for saying that.
We're not advocating any of that.
No, I don't advocate that, but it makes me want
peaceful parenting.
No, but we should be able to teach our kids what's healthy for them.
Yeah, turning your kids
kind of people
to stuff that you have no control over. Turning your kids over to something where you don't know what they're getting or how they're getting it. Just think about this. It was bad enough when we used to tell people, why are you sitting your kids in front of the TV? Letting your TV raise your kids. At least you knew it was on the TV. You had a program. You could say, oh, well, I don't have time, but I'm going to turn on some Paw Patrol because, it's a good, wholesome show. And they weren't necessarily wrong for a short period of time. Yeah, if you've got a phone call you have to get onto and you want your kid to kind of be quiet, show them Paw Patrol. It's not a horrible thing once in a while. But when you say, oh, here's my iPad, just go do what you're going to do. I've got something else you got to take care of. Now you've lost all control. You have no idea what they're going to see. You have no idea what's coming in. And so what makes that better than the problems we had with being raised by a TV, by being raised by an iPad or a phone? It's even worse. So yeah, there's
always going to be something that exploits the disconnection between parent and child. Yeah,
always. And that's why and by the way, helping your child recognize and regulate their emotions builds a connection between you and your kid. And they have that better sense of, not only do they have a better sense of self, they have a better sense of who they are in relation to society because they have a bond with their parent. They have a connection. They have what they call an attachment. And that helps them feel more control too. And all those things, emotional control, building a sense of autonomy, building a sense of connection, that helps them build who they are. And then they're less likely to fall victim to some of those other traps that we see, like 70% of the kids. They'll be part of that 30% that are like, you know what? Y'all have fun. This doesn't sound like fun to me.
We want them to have a healthy attachment that people who care about them, people who are going to help them, people who are going to help them grow and become better people, a better person. So to make that distinction within yourself, right? To say, hey, I'm going to stop yelling. I'm going to stop manipulating. I'm going to stop hitting my kid because I want to make sure when they get older, they don't normalize that. And they're not going to be around people who are depressed, people who are negative. They're going to want to keep building within themselves. And as a father, that is part of our duty, right? That's our job, is we have to build confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. We have to teach our kids that you were saying before, right? Life is tough, but yeah, that's okay. We're going to be tougher. We're going to be stronger. We're not going to let the outside influence or the chaos in the world control our lives, right? We're going to live on our own terms. And that goes back to fitting in this box that we always talk about, right? So many young people, so many young adults are on a path that has been chosen for them. And I fully believe that if we can just break them off, right? Just put a little fork in the road and have these young adults, the next generations, really go for freedom, really say, hey, I'm not going to allow people to control me. I want to go pursue things. I might fail. I might have setbacks, but whatever I build is going to be mine. And that doesn't happen if the parents are stuck in that box, right? We have to break out together.
Yeah. One of the hardest and easiest at the same time things I ever did was my oldest son, Caleb, went to serve as a missionary for his church. And that for him means that he leaves our home. He was going to the Philippines and he was going to be gone for 2 years. COVID interrupted that, but the typical time is to be gone for 2 years. And to know that he's going to be completely outside of our help for 2 straight years. And that he's going to have to learn some very, very hard lessons on his own. I was both utterly delighted as a parent to see him do that, because I knew what he was going to go through. But at the same time, it about broke my heart, because I knew what he was going to go through. And the pain of knowing that he was going to go through that was really hard to deal with. But the pride and the happiness and the expectation of knowing how he was going to come out the other side overwhelmed that. It was, like I said, the easiest and hardest thing I'd ever done as a parent was to give my son that opportunity to do something really hard on his own without any support from me. And then we would hear from him occasionally, and he would talk about some of the hard things he was going through, and you'd listen to him, and it would just break your heart. But then you'd just look at him and say, well, good luck. Because you're not there to back him up. So yeah, those moments, those times when you can stop being afraid for your kids, when you can stop and realize you put in the work, now it's time to let them do their thing. The most rewarding things you'll ever get as a parent. It's amazing. I didn't even get to half of what I was wanting to talk about today. You guys are.
You got to the parts.
Sidetracked.
You got to the parts you needed to get to. I call that the I know moment. And it's hard as shit, as any parent on so many levels. Caleb's journey, that's a big one. But even these parents who, when you let your kids their hand go for the first time, hey, I can walk. As a parent, you're like, I know you can. That I know is hard. Hey, Dad, I got this. I know you do. And that's what hurts so bad, is I know it's now your turn to go. I know you're free. I know you're further from me. I know you need me less. And, I know you're going to go in the world. I know you're going to get hurt. I know you're going to get back up, though. But all that, as a parent, you're like, I just love you so much that I wish I could hold you from this, but I know it's my job to let you go out there and just to arm you with all the tools you need to go thrive. Not just survive, but thrive. And to Anthony's point on the connection of having fathers in the home, it can't be overstated. I hope my kid is the one where he walks in and, oh, you guys are all collecting depression cards now. I'm going to go ahead and pass on that and just go do my thing. You're like, oh, you're all looking to go do this. Like, I'm just going to go do me. You keep doing you. Like, you're your own person. My dad taught me that. My dad taught me I'm my own person. You're your own person. You guys can do that. I'm not going to collect that card, though. I don't want to join that hobby. And that's just what we do, is we live it through example. We do us. We don't let things hold us down. They don't let things hold them down. There cannot be any hypocritical tone to it. You cannot advise something you aren't living. And one of the things I stress online with is different enemy there, which is the people who fake a life. But it's the same message. If you're not living it, you can't be giving it. So as a dad, you've got to work on you. Anthony and I just dropped a video today on inner peace. You want a peaceful home, it starts with peace within your soul. You've got to fix you, and then you can grow that and share that. But if there's a disaster and fear and pain and anxiety inside, you can't fake it. You can put on the clown makeup and smile and try to get your way through it. But kids see, they know. It's in your eyes. It's the energy you're giving off. They know, like, that's not real. They see behind the scenes. They hear behind the scenes. They see the stuff that you hide from the world that happens in the home. They're there for that part of you. When the makeup comes off and, dad's having a breakdown, mom and dad are fighting, whatever they're seeing, they're there, and that's making a bigger impact than the smile you had in the photo you took out in front of the world.
That hits actually pretty hard, because that was the experience I had growing up. My mom and my dad were both the kind of people that wanted to present that perfect face to everybody in public. And it just fell apart dramatically in the home. I actually picked up on it fairly early on. If I did something really stupid, I would call my dad while he was at work. Hey, Dad, I just blew up my shotgun. True story, by the way. And he would never lose his cool at work. That was anathema. He couldn't even consider losing control at work. So I'd call him at work. Dad, I blew up the shotgun. All right, we'll talk about it when I get home, son. So now I knew he had several hours to percolate on that. And then he would come home and he wouldn't be like frothing mad. But if I sprung it on him while he was at home, Dad, I blew up the shotgun, probably going to never hear the end of that, and I would probably get punished till the end of time. So yeah, your persona as a person, be consistent. Why are you a completely different animal when you're with your friends or your coworkers than you are when you're with your family? Why do you treat them better than you treat your family? That doesn't make any sense either. Who's more important? Who's going to be with you longer? You can get fired from your job. People are going to leave. You're not even going to see them again. I just changed jobs. I haven't even spoken to somebody from my previous job in 6 months. They don't give a crap where I went. All my sons, my daughters, they're with me forever. I should have a better relationship with them than I have with my best friends. They should be the most important thing in my life. And I think we forget that as a society sometimes. It's okay. They're with me forever, so I can do whatever I want to them because they're my kids. They can't leave. They're not like my friends. My friends can leave. My kids can't. I don't think it's even a conscious decision, but that's how we treat them. So, excellent point. Another conversation.
Covered. No, I was going to say, we'll have you back on when you've claimed that PhD. That'll be the next one, the success and celebration of years and years of hard work and study, research, development, and putting it all together for a comprehensive unit as you go forward into the world. But for this one, the emotional and cognitive development of children, absolutely fantastic discussion. The insights you've dropped are they're invaluable. Anybody that takes this and listens to it will be like, oh, I get it a little bit better. But again, that comes down to the application of what we discussed. So before, we close the curtains on this one, Jared, did you have anything that you wanted to hit that we couldn't or didn't dive deep enough, or maybe some challenges to those who watch this for them to carry on afterwards to think about?
I got one other one I'll give as a quick hit that I think will help with practical working with kids on some of this stuff, emotional development specifically. There's more background that I can give you on it that's research based. But one of the things that's kind of interesting about working with kids in emotional development is they're not very good at recognizing facial expressions and body language for emotion. The younger they are, the worse they are at it. And you don't really become proficient at it till you're a late teen. And then when you throw in other contexts like tone of voice and context and other things like that, you really don't become truly good at recognizing the emotional state of somebody by looking at their body language and their facial expression till you're well into your adulthood. So when you're working with your kids, especially with teenagers, when you are expecting them to understand the emotion that you have based on what you're saying and your facial expression and your body language, it's a mistake that we make. Because when I'm talking to another adult, they can look at my facial expression and go, whoa, angry Jared is here. Let's let him go because we don't want to disrupt that, or, hey, sad Jared is here. Jared, what's wrong? And so you can recognize those emotions and step in and react to them better because we have that experience. We have that knowledge of being able to do that. Kids don't. So when you're talking to them and you're expecting them to, and you say, this is my, I'm very disappointed in you. Oh, and you have this face. I'm very disappointed in you. This is not, the type of behavior that we would expect to see. That was a really poor decision. This facial expression, disappointment, also registers as anger. And I may not be angry with them. I may simply be disappointed that they did something that was kind of stupid. And we're going to talk about why that was dumb. But the facial expression, they're going to look at that and now they get fear reaction because this, my disappointed face, is also my angry face. So they can't distinguish as well between what you're presenting as your emotion. So when you're working with kids, it's far better to be mindful of that and say, okay, facial expression here. This is my calm expression. I'm not angry. I want you to understand what we're going to talk about. And let me tell you what I'm feeling, what my emotions are right now, and then we'll go from there. So being mindful to explicitly tell them what your emotions are at the beginning of a conversation will also serve as one of those points where they help to identify and regulate emotion because now they're learning how to interact with other people's emotions, not just understand their own. So just as a quick hit thing, if you want to teach your kids, be very mindful that they don't understand emotion with other people. And that's even worse than understanding their own emotions. So again, it comes down to that. You're not a kid. You don't think like a kid. You don't understand like a kid. Don't think that you do, and don't think that they understand the way you do.
Well, what about if you're a dad whose calm face looks like the angry face? What would you tell him?
You're screwed. No, I would say that that's even more important. Like, and actually, that's kind of true. Let me a short experience. My dad had a very loud voice. I mean, one of the loudest voices I've ever heard. And the problem was that he didn't really relate to his kids very well. So every once in a while, I'd bring over a friend to meet my dad, and he would get super excited, and all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, Ray! Hey, it's good to see you, Anthony. I'm so happy that you're my. Where are you guys going tonight? What's going on? What's happening?" And my friends would freak out. They'd be like, "Nah! Like, why's your dad yelling at me?" And he wasn't yelling. His excited voice was as loud as most people's shouting voice. And so it freaked out. All my friends were terrified of my dad. And I did not understand this until I was in my 20s. And my friends were still terrified of my dad in my 20s because he was a big, scary dude. But he wasn't angry at them. He wasn't upset with them. He was excited. He was legitimately happy to meet these people. But because of his tone of voice and his facial expression, people always thought he was really mad. And so, yeah, if you have a dad who's like that, who doesn't, first of all, you need to be able to understand what is the effect you're having on your kids. Have you watched their interaction? Have you paid attention to how they react to you?
You need some self-awareness.
You got to have some self-awareness. You need to pick that up quickly. And that was something that I struggled with a lot. I know I'm terrifying. I'm 6'4", I'm 200 pounds, and I've got a loud voice too. It's nice and low, and it carries real well. And all of my kids' friends are scared of me, and I don't yell at all around them. But they're just terrified because I'm a big, scary-looking dude. They think I hate them. Well, one of them I do, but not all of them.
One of them's gonna watch this and be like, "Shit, is that
no
me?"
names?"
But I'm at least aware of it, and so when they do come over, I immediately tone everything down. And when I come into the room, I'm like, "Hey, Sabrina, I'm really glad that your friend's here. And hey, Adeline, it's nice to meet you. If you guys need anything, let me know." And I try as hard as I can to tone everything down so that they are not. My kids are used to it. They're not scared of that anymore, but the friends aren't. And the same thing goes. I now need, when I start talking to them, I actually found myself doing this just yesterday with my daughter. We were talking about something. I got a little excited. You guys have seen it here. Angry Jared is the best Jared, but it gets worked up and he gets a little bit loud. He gets a little bit excited, and my facial expressions change. And I, as soon as I recognize, like, oh crap, and I turned to her, I said, "Sabrina, sorry, I'm a little worked up about this. I want you to know that I'm not angry. I really need you to understand. I'm not angry about this. I'm just the ideas that we're talking about are things that I have a problem with, and I get a little excited. I'm very sorry. I'm not angry with you. I'm angry about the concepts." And she was like, "No, I get it. It's fine." But I was able to recognize it, and then I had to back off and say, "Okay, sorry. That's not what I meant. I need you to understand." So yeah, if you have it's self-awareness more than anything. But if you know that you're a big scary dude, or even if you think you're a big scary dude, mitigate that right away. Go and find a way to worry about that.
So we had to do a video on that. Anybody check it out. It's called The Tone Within Your Home. We recorded it. It's body language, it's tone of voice. I had the same issue, Jared. I come up like, this is my normal speaking voice. This is how I talk to people, man. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm all in. Like, let's do this. And then I'm like, dude, I'm like yelling at these people. And I get like half the videos we record, I'm just like, "Anthony, I need to calm the fuck down, bro." Like, I'm like all amped up and coming at it. But it's because of that thing, when you're pumped about something, it just comes out. I think it's good that men share passion. I think too few share any sort of passion. So when it comes out, for me, it's just a natural state. It took a little bit to get to this point of just, fuck it. Here's where I am. Lines drawn. You don't like it, that's a you problem. But it does come across a little heavier at times, and I do have to be aware of myself, especially with kids, obviously.
Yeah, you recognize it, and you're able to deal with it. And you may not recognize that you've gotten to that point in the moment, but the sooner you can recognize that you've gotten there, the more you can take a moment to say, "Whoa, sorry guys, just me getting worked up." we'll work on that later.
And it's important to be aware of with children, right?
Oh,
with another adult,
so.
with another adult, they could say, "Hey, buddy, tone it down," right?
Yeah, kids won't.
Kids won't do that. They don't. Yeah, they're not assertive yet. So it's important to recognize that with your kids. You want to make sure that you're communicating properly, peacefully, calmly, and you're not overreacting.
Yeah, but just recognizing that your kids don't understand your emotions. They don't have the experience. They don't have the ability to do it. Just like anything else cognitively, they aren't developed there yet. They don't have the skill.
I don't understand my emotions, Jared.
Nobody does, Anthony, but that's your problem. But I'm just the bottom line for most of everything we've talked about today is assuming that your child understands everything that it is to be an adult and assuming that you understand everything that it is to be a kid are both absolutely wrong. Your child is not capable of thinking, understanding, reacting, and controlling like an adult. And you as an adult are absolutely incapable of thinking, reacting, and regulating like a child. The gulf cannot be bridged. And I mean that as literally, as practically, as metaphorically, however you want to talk about it, every last way. That gap cannot be bridged. And what you have to do is try to find a way to work around the gap, to connect with that gap being there all the time, and to have patience that gap will narrow over time. You can't say, oh, you don't understand me? Let me teach you how to reason as a 6-year-old. Bam, we're there. No, that's going to take another 10, 15 years for them to come up to your level. And even then it won't quite be there because you're going to be an old freaking man and your kids are going to be in their 20s. And you're still different. Work with where they are, who they are, and how they are. Don't try to force something that you think onto them.
So my kids are in my 20s. Were you saying that I'm an old man? Was that what I got from that?
In fact, yes, that was exactly what I was saying. I'm still older than you are, Anthony.
Just to be clear.
Now we're even on that whole 12-year-old mark. Fuck, we've come full circle now. Got all that gray in that beard, man.
I don't even grow a beard anymore because all I have is a brown black mustache. My entire beard is completely gray now. So I'm older than you, Anthony. I know that.
Look, this topic is one that parents need to hear. They dive into. There's much more, nuance to be had. And that's where the discussions come, where if you drop in your personal comment into the comment section below, shoot a DM. I'll have links to Jared's content, myself and Anthony. It's all going to be in the description. But there is nuance to this. And obviously anybody watching this is, well, what if or what about? We can't answer all of that in this discussion. But what we can do is address it if you let us know your specific situation. So again, through DMs and through comments on the YouTube videos, that's how we're going about this. But if you go through, if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, if you go into our library, a lot of the reference points we were making here about the tone in the home, about how to connect, different aspects to parenting, we've touched on a lot of those. On Monday, so coming up a few days after this one's dropped, today is the 5th of November. So on the 8th, you'll have Lilia Shot. That'll be dropping. That's another context where we're getting the view from a female, from the mother, and how she's working with people. We now have Jared. So dive in and start listening to these other voices that are on this channel, but also go into the YouTube videos we've done and the topics that we've covered, put it all together. There's no greater investment you can make as a parent than in your performance as a parent. And understand, it's not something you just get. You're like, I had a kid, all of a sudden I've got all the tools needed to be a dad. No, you can learn, you can refine, you can hone it all in and get better at doing each of these things. But that comes from reps. It comes from studying. It comes from making it a priority. So Jared, I want to thank you for your time, for your insights, and for all that you're doing to not just level up yourself as a man and a father, but choosing to share that, to come on this channel, to share that with others. That's greatly appreciated, man. And our time is our greatest asset. And you gave us over an hour and a half today. So thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure. And happy to come back anytime, do a QA, talk about other subjects. So whenever you need it, let me know.
That will happen. Anthony, you got anything for the closing?
Of course I do. Jared, it's always good talking to you, brother. And we appreciate you coming on Oak and Rock Fatherhood. We're looking to get this message out there. If you guys aren't subscribed, hit the button, like the videos. And we're looking to bring a lot more conversations, a lot more interviews to help fathers, to help parents become better. And that's it, man. Like and subscribe. And don't know what else to say.
Oh man, you were right there. we got to work on those closings. You were right. You were right there. You had to.
That's all right.
That was good. That was good. We're getting better every episode. Listen to everybody that tuned in. Make sure you've liked it, subscribe. Like Anthony said, look, another episode from Oak and Rock Fatherhood has come your way. Take it, apply the information, and you will improve. And if you're not sure with what to do, the consequences you're getting from the choices you're making, reach out and we will address that together, especially on our live Q&A sessions each Wednesday. You guys.